The iconic Olympic Stadium is set to become the new home of West Ham United.
We want to be in the Champions League. We want to be like Man City, Chelsea or Man United, where our brands are recognised all around the world. To do that, you've got to have a big stadium.
West Ham's owners have struck a deal the public knows very little about. The deal could make the club's owners, two of Britain's richest men, hundreds of millions of pounds richer.
This is about Olympic Stadium, which has now been effectively transferred to a commercial enterprise for virtually nothing.
Tonight, we reveal West Ham are getting most of the running costs of their new home paid for them. Critics and experts say it means they're getting the Olympic Stadium, in effect, rent-free.
To all intents and purposes, this is a contract which gives West Ham the stadium for no rent whatsoever.
Something doesn't smell right.
Last month, the superstar athletes were back in the Olympic Stadium, reliving their triumphs at London 2012 for the anniversary games. It was a brief reminder of the glories of 3 years ago, when the country roared Team GB on to our best haul of Olympic medals in more than 100 years.
It's an absolutely amazing feeling. You know, I've got so many special memories from 2012, and you know, that feeling of stepping into the stadium, having that adrenaline and being able to run a really good time is very pleasing.
For this event, the stadium was configured as people remember it, in athletics mode. But in future, it will spend nearly 10 months of every year primarily hosting football. The conversion bill to make this a home fit for the Hammers is running wildly over budget at £272 million. But West Ham United are paying just £15 million for the keys to the most prestigious sporting address in London. West Ham United were in all sorts of trouble in 2010 when David Gold and David Sullivan bought a controlling share in the club. It was broke, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy.
I'd like to introduce the new co-owners of West Ham United, David Gold and David Sullivan.
The colourful duo made their money in pornography and lingerie. But they also had long-standing business interests in football, having owned and run Birmingham City FC for 16 years, with Karen Brady, whom they appointed as vice-chairman of West Ham. They claimed the decision to buy West Ham was not motivated by business.
To be honest, we wouldn't buy this club at all if it wasn't West Ham. It makes no commercial sense for anyone to buy this club.
But in the same press conference, the new owners revealed they did have a plan.
It's a major part of our strategy that West Ham moved to the Olympic Stadium, which is 3 miles from this ground in the borough of Newham.
When they bought West Ham in 2010, Gold and Sullivan were well aware that the greatest show on earth was coming to a stadium near them within 2 years. Their business strategy from the very outset was based on securing the Olympic Stadium after London 2012 was over.
Gold and Sullivan are businessmen and they know how to make money, and the potential for West Ham to expand, grow, develop will have really driven their decision to become associated with the club.
Gold and Sullivan may have bought a club that was down on its luck, but one that had a rich heritage. West Ham United's roots go back to 1895, when it was the factory team of Thames Ironworks, a legacy remembered in the team's nickname, the Hammers, which also feature on the famous crest of the team. The club's historic home is the Boleyn Ground at Upton Park, where they've been resident for over 110 years.
I was one of those we picked up and passed over all the supporters and sat on the front, as far as I'm to you, away from the football itself.
Yeah. What's your highlight?
The highlight?
Favourite memory over the years?
When we won the FA Cup and we won the World Cup the following year, with Bobby Moore and Martin Peters and Geoff Hurst. Yeah.
Racing to beat the whistle, Geoff Hurst saw an opening in the defence and achieved the hat-trick.
Arguably, the club's finest moment came in 1966, in a game they weren't even playing in, the World Cup final, in which 3 West Ham stars, including Sir Bobby Moore, the captain, played a decisive part in England's victory.
Playing that as West Ham's, do you?
Yeah, because West Ham won the cup.
Well, scored all the goals and picked the trophy up, so it's got to be ours, hasn't it?
The club is no doubt hoping for a return to their glory days in their new home. But before the Olympic Stadium is theirs, it needs a huge refit, necessary because it was originally designed to host athletics and only athletics.
Lord Coe was obviously the hero of the day. He'd brought the Olympics to the country, done a fantastic job, and insisted that this was no negotiation. There had to be an athletics track, whereas in fact there was just a handful of days a year when an athletics legacy was required.
And an athletics legacy was incompatible with the requirements of a football stadium. Placing an 8-lane running track between supporters and the pitch meant the stadium was never going to be an ideal experience for football fans.
They built the wrong stadium. Not enough thought went in it. It was quite clear to me early doors that with just athletics there, this is a white elephant that would be in disuse in a handful of years.
How naive was the idea then that the post-games use could be based purely on athletics?
Yeah, some serious questions have got to be asked of leading lights who were advocating that at the time, and I think Seb Coe needs to take some responsibility there.
When organisers finally accepted football as the principal legacy of the Olympic Stadium, they invited bids from interested clubs. Tottenham Hotspur and West Ham emerged as the leading contenders. Spurs' plan to convert this place into a football arena was simple: knock it down and start again.
There was a Spurs option, and that was by far more sensible, but they were ruled out at the very early stages of the contract because they didn't include on the site a running track. And actually their figures stacked up and they didn't want any more public money.
Rejecting Tottenham's bid may have saved a few blushes, especially Lord Coe's, but it came at a cost. The legacy body responsible for the stadium, the London Legacy Development Corporation, chaired by London's Mayor Boris Johnson, insisted the stadium must retain its iconic Olympic shape and, crucially, the running track. Preconditions that West Ham accepted and that left them as the only serious bidder for the stadium.
Boris bent over backwards to accommodate them, and they ended up, West Ham ended up with a deal which is astoundingly good for them.
West Ham could ask whatever they wanted out of the site within reason, and we had to deliver it to them.
Just 3 miles from the Olympic Stadium in Upton Park, many West Ham fans can't believe their luck.
Been given the stadium as a start, so they've not really had much choice where we move to, and it's just the fact that it's just down the road is absolutely perfect.
This is us basically being given a chance to launch ourselves onto the global stage more, and I can't see how you can turn that down.
We want to be in the Champions League. We want to be like Man City, Chelsea or Man United, where our brands are recognised all around the world. To do that, you've got to have a big stadium.
Not all supporters are as excited by the move up the road to the Olympic Stadium. Some fans fear a loosening of the club's ties with this part of the East End.
I don't believe there's a need to move. I think that we struggle to fill the ground as it is. It could have been extended. We could have stayed at Upton Park, or the bowling ground, the spiritual home of West Ham United.
In the West Ham United Supporters Club, there's considerable unease about the motives of the current owners. They say West Ham's management are excluding them from the planning and are worried they'll be left stranded by the move.
Were you disappointed in the club?
Very disappointed, because we initially thought we was going to go with them, but then, we just got locked out, really. This is a community that's been going a long while where, we're going to lose everything.
I don't think that they really do care about West Ham supporters.
So why do you think they're moving then?
Profit, profit, profit.
While West Ham fans argue the pros and cons of the move, work is continuing at the Olympic Stadium to make it fit for football after London 2012. Populous, the original designers of this stadium, have come up with a system of retractable seating that will move supporters in the lower tier closer to the action.
So 15 metres approximately here. As you can see, the new drip line on the roof has been set out so that when all the seating moves forward into this new position for pitch sports, all of the seats in the house are covered.
So you're how far from the pitch now then? What, 15 yards?
This is about 20 metres.
Yeah.
This is the worst case situation. The curvature of the lower tier takes the seats at the end much, much closer.
I see.
The seats at the end overhang the track by probably more than half.
We asked Arup Associates, one of the biggest engineering groups in the world, for their views on the conversion process.
It's about as big a modification as you'd ever want to do. I think if it were any bigger, you'd say, let's start again.
But when you consider that a lot of this would have been avoided had we just designed it in the best way possible originally. It's hard to escape the fact that it's a botched job, isn't it?
Had it been decided that West Ham would be the legacy occupants, if you like, of the stadium, it would have been designed slightly differently. So yes, to some extent, what they're doing is not ideal.
Deputy Chairman Tristram Carfrey was the lead designer of the City of Manchester Stadium, used for the Commonwealth Games in 2002, and also converted from an athletics venue to a football stadium for Manchester City.
And that's what we have here, is it, on this side?
The pitch there is 5 metres lower, and the bottom bowl has been installed after the event.
Given that this had already been designed, built, and was a success, why didn't we learn the lesson from this?
The only reason that the lessons, if you like, from here weren't learnt was here it was very clear. We were going to hold the Commonwealth Games, then it was going to be a football stadium. That was not the plan initially at Stratford.
Could have been.
It could have been.
The conversion costs for the City of Manchester Stadium were in the region of £42 million, about £62 million in today's money, adjusted for inflation. Compare that with the conversion costs of this stadium. Originally budgeted at £154 million, the costs have ballooned to £272 million.
It is already a white elephant. It's a white elephant because we have to throw so much money at it in order to get it to work.
The stadium may be seen by some as a white elephant for taxpayers, but to the new owners of West Ham, it's more like a gift horse. It's clear David Sullivan and David Gold think very highly of the bargain they've struck. Having bought into the club in 2010 at a valuation of £105 million, they revised their valuation after securing the move to the Olympic Stadium to £400 million. On paper, that represents a profit of nearly 300% within 4 years.
I think that West Ham United in the Premier League, in the Olympic Stadium, is a sleeping giant.
At Ogilvy and Mather, one of Britain's top marketing and PR agencies, Jonathan McCallum is keeping a watching brief on how the stadium move develops.
For me, it's all about location, location, location. So people who might not have been interested in going to the old Upton Park will certainly want to go and see Premier League football in the Olympic Stadium.
This is a very important location for West Ham, in the same way that Paris Saint-Germain, now owned by Qataris, has effectively become the face of brand Paris. I think potentially West Ham could well become the face of brand London.
Last year, West Ham unveiled the new design for the club badge that will grace their shirts in their first season in the Olympic Stadium. They went from this to that. Spot the difference?
The London bit, I don't think that's suitable. You know, it should have been the date we were formed.
Why not? What's wrong with putting London? It's only a word.
We were in London, ain't we? We don't need them to identify that we're a London club.
West Ham United, not London United.
No. This is the badge I think that we should carry on with. This is West Ham, isn't it?
Why add London? We know you're in London. What's the point?
They're pushing it. They're pushing the brand. It's going to be a worldwide brand now. You know, this is going to be seen by people all over the world. London, a London club.
A brand. I mean, what would Bobby Moore and Jeff Hurst make of that? A brand. It's a football club, isn't it? I mean, is that not the
first and foremost? It's a football club. The owners want to see it as a brand as well. That's what football's become as a business more than anything now, more than a sport.
Rebranding West Ham as the London club is all about capitalising on the success of the 2012 games. And being a tenant here inside this stadium means instant international recognition from both future fans and potential investors.
I think for the billionaire investors, there's probably a very, very short list. And I wouldn't be surprised if West Ham United were at the top of that list now.
We're not come here to hopefully bang it out as a Russian in 5 years' time. It's back in English hands, and we want it to stay in English hands.
Gold and Sullivan have made a lot of money in their lives. There's far easier way to make money than investing it into a club that was £100 million in debt. I can tell you now.
You really don't think they're going to sell it on to foreign investors?
I will guarantee you, in their lifetime, they will not. I've spoken to them a number of times about this, and I believe them.
If it's still in English ownership by 2020, I'll be very surprised. The Qataris already own part of the Olympic Park, they own the village. The Chinese are investing very heavily in the East End of London. We also know that American investors too have a predisposition towards buying English football clubs. So my view is that by 2020 we'll either have a Qatari, a Chinese or an American owner here.
Whoever ends up owning West Ham in the future, the present problem for the club is recruiting new fans to fill their shiny new stadium.
Adrian throws off his gloves. Will he need them anymore? No! Because he scored! The winning penalty!
Upton Park, their current home, is famous for its supercharged atmosphere on big match nights, like this thriller in the third round of the FA Cup in January. The capacity here is 35,000. West Ham's new home, however, will hold 54,000. Nearly 20,000 new fans have to be found if their new home isn't to become a vast empty bowl in which the noise and passion of home games will simply evaporate. West Ham will be hoping to recruit a lot more fans like these visitors.
We'll have more people coming from abroad, you know, these Scandinavian hammers, the Italian hammers, us Maltese hammers. So it would be a great move.
It will bring more income to the club, more players. I think it will be a good move.
The Olympic Stadium for West Ham opens up their brand to an international audience, and I don't think they're going to be worried about empty seats.
But other football clubs around London are worried about empty seats at their own stadiums. Leyton Orient, the nearest professional club to the Olympic Stadium, have claimed that West Ham will resort to dumping cheap or even free tickets onto the market to recruit new fans locally. Currently in the fourth tier of English football, Leyton Orient's former chairman has argued in the courts and in Parliament that they will be crushed as a result of West Ham's good fortune.
West Ham moves closer to a smaller business like Leyton Orient and gives away 100,000 tickets a year. And also advertises season tickets for £99 to youngsters, Premiership football for 99 quid against all the top teams in the Olympic Stadium, this iconic building. It's going to have a hugely adverse effect on the local community club.
The last home game of the season for Charlton Athletic at the Valley in southeast London. Another club within easy reach of West Ham's big new stadium.
Any loyal fan will stay with the club that they've been with all their life. I came down here when I was 11 years of age and I'm 60. So there's no other club that will make me move over, cheap tickets or not.
No, we've got plenty of fans local. They always support Charlton, so we're not worried about West Ham. They'll be down next season anyway.
But Steve Clarke and Richard Hunt of the Charlton Athletic Supporters Trust take a less benign view of their East End neighbours' elevation to the Olympic Stadium.
We're looking at the new fans, and so an opportunity to get new fans, which Charlton are attempting along with everybody else, that's the area that we worry. What West Ham are doing is, with all these spare seats, this getting on for 20,000 spare seats, they're going to be dumping tickets everywhere they possibly can to get people in.
The Supporters Trust points out these fears appear justified already. West Ham's local council, Newham, is contributing £40 million towards the conversion cost of the Olympic Stadium. In return, they get 100,000 tickets per season from the club to distribute as the council sees fit.
West Ham United has told the BBC it will cut season ticket prices by...
And just a few months ago, Karen Brady, vice-chairman of West Ham, announced they will be reducing season ticket prices by 25% for their inaugural season in the new stadium, making them the cheapest in the Premier League. She emphasised the initiative had nothing to do with the move, but was a response to the record new deal for Premiership TV rights.
With the new television money coming in, £5 billion, it's really important to recognise that one of the most important things is creating the future support, and you do that by encouraging people to come to the ground.
Karen Brady has presented this as all to do with the great new TV rights windfall, but we don't buy that at all. We think that it's a preemptive PR strike to deflect inspection of and criticism of the stadium deal, which is backed by so much taxpayers' money.
The Charlton Supporters Trust was so concerned about the possibility of unfair taxpayer subsidy to West Ham United that they applied for a copy of the rental agreement under the Freedom of Information Act.
It is a contract between a public authority administering state funds and a private concern. It's exactly what the Freedom of Information law was designed to help citizens understand more.
David Goldstone is the chief executive of the public authority that owns the stadium.
I've spent a lot of my career in doing large, complex commercial transactions in the public sector, and there is a presumption in favour of transparency that's really important and we take very seriously.
The contract is 207 pages long, and most of the pages look like this. It's a sea of black ink.
So We have released the agreement. We've released all of it except the parts that are commercially confidential and relevant to future transactions we might do.
However, almost every important detail of the contract was redacted when it was released, though some elements have come to light from other sources since. Despite the legacy body's claim of transparency, the list of what was blacked out is a long one. How much the club are paying in rent, West Ham's contribution to the conversion costs of the stadium, who gets the catering and corporate hospitality revenues, who gets the sponsorship money from the naming rights of the stadium, worth many millions per season. There's a provision for the club's rent to be reduced if the club is relegated from the Premier League, but the value of the rebate is kept secret.
I thought it was laughable. It was just confidential all the way through, or every relevant term, really. And my question was, confidential from whom? You know, where is the business confidentiality in a government asset being leased to a commercial enterprise?
One of the few unredacted sections lists the facilities and services the concessionaire, that's West Ham United, can expect to be included as part of their rent. It's an eye-opener. Stadium heating and light bills, home and away team changing rooms, ticketing costs, security, lavatory facilities for the supporters, pitch maintenance, under-soil heating and even the goalposts, goal nets and corner flags are all to be provided by the grantor of the contract. In other words, by the taxpayer. Two separate football business analysts have told us the value of the services and facilities amount to between 1.4 and £2.5 million each year.
The deal would seem to be a rental of around about 2 million, perhaps 2.5 million per year. But what we're hearing is that within that deal, the owners of the stadium, effectively the government, will pay for policing, will pay for stewarding, will pay for ticketing, will pay for ground maintenance. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. That actually comes to more than £2.5 million a year. So does that mean the stadium is rent-free?
To all intents and purposes, this is a contract which gives West Ham the stadium at a peppercorn rent at most, or to be honest, for no rent whatsoever.
At City Hall, members of the London Assembly have been trying to get more information on the terms of the deal. In March, the Oversight Committee said the public had a right to greater transparency and called on the Mayor, Boris Johnson, who also chairs the Legacy Corporation, to publish more details.
Incredibly frustrating that we weren't able to get to the bottom of this commercial deal.
Their reasons for redacting so much information were initially threefold. The first one, which almost made me laugh when I read it, was on grounds of national security, as well as health or safety, and finally commercial confidentiality.
You don't buy this defence that it's down to confidentiality. You don't buy that.
I don't buy that, but I'll tell you why, because we didn't need to have that with Man City moving into the Commonwealth Games Stadium. So why the secrecy in London when in Manchester, the deal with Manchester City Council was quite open and clear.
Perhaps the most important thing we don't know in the secret deal is exactly how much money the taxpayer would receive as a clawback in the future in the event of West Ham's owners selling the club at a profit as a result of their occupancy of the Olympic Stadium. And then, of course, they might sell it on as well.
Of course they might sell it on. And
how much would the taxpayer get back?
I haven't got a clue.
What happens if West Ham sell to a Middle East consortium for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds, which I believe West Ham will be worth in their new home? But at the end of the day, they have looked after themselves. Government's job is to look after us, the taxpayer.
This is public money that's been put into this. Don't the public have a right to know what the return would be?
I believe the public have a right to know.
Boris Johnson is repeatedly refusing to release details of this deal. I think we're coming to the stage where there needs to be some form of public inquiry.
I will give way to the member if he's going to agree with me on this matter.
In the House of Commons, Chris Bryant, the Shadow Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, has clashed with Boris Johnson and called for the full details of the deal to be published as a matter of urgency.
We're talking about such enormous sums of money that I think most British taxpayers would just want to know what the deal was that was signed on their behalf. And that's the first hurdle that the government has got to cross. If it doesn't come through that, then I think the demands for a full public inquiry will grow, and that's the point at which I'll start wanting to join those.
The buck stops with Boris Johnson. He's the man in charge. He's been chairman of virtually every stage of the procedure right the way through since his installation as Mayor of London. But if I'm going to take him seriously as a politician and as a man, I want honesty, I want transparency, and it's time for him to tell the truth.
There's a sting in this tale. Whoever ends up owning West Ham at the Olympic Stadium could find themselves the subject of an investigation by the European Commission on the basis that, as a result of this deal, West Ham received unfair state subsidies.
State aid rules in Europe are there for a good reason, which is that no government should be giving financial advantage of whatever kind to one commercial player over another commercial player, whether within their country or elsewhere. And these are very real issues that are already affecting other football clubs in Europe.
The European Commission is investigating state aid complaints against 12 clubs in Holland and Spain, including some of the biggest names in football, such as Barcelona and Real Madrid. 2 complaints against the West Ham deal have already been received by the Commission, but they were made by individuals rather than a financially interested party and were rejected. If a complaint is made by a rival football club, it will be investigated more thoroughly. And other clubs have up to 10 years to bring their case if they wish.
I have to say I'm not sort of losing sleep about whether somebody else is going to make a challenge into something that's already been looked at and considered and isn't being inquired into by the appropriate body any further.
If it were subsequently proven that there had been illegal state aid provided to West Ham through this deal, then West Ham would end up having to pay back any potential financial advantage that might have accrued to them.
Which could run to millions.
Which could run to the best part of $500 million.
Every cup final has a winner, of course, and the winners in this case appear to be 2 entrepreneurs whose net worth may be enhanced, some would say, at taxpayers' expense by hundreds of millions of pounds. Because Gold and Sullivan, the owners of West Ham, seized an opportunity when others made a mess of the legacy for the Olympic Stadium.
We know it was a marvellous Olympics for Britain. We didn't do the planning for the legacy, and that, I think, is a national disgrace.
We invited Lord Co, Boris Johnson and West Ham United to be interviewed for this programme. They all declined, but West Ham issued the following statement.
Without us, the stadium would lose money. The suggestion we are getting the stadium rent-free is wrong. We are more than paying our way. There is absolutely no chance tickets will be dumped. We need to move because we have simply outgrown the Boleyn ground. It defies logic that David Gold and David Sullivan will sell the club. They have made it clear they would like to pass their shares on to their children.
And a spokesman for Boris Johnson added,
"The Olympic Stadium remains in public ownership and will be capable of hosting a variety of other events and sports. The Mayor has secured long-term sustainable investment in order to protect an iconic stadium."
For the old guard still gathering in the West Ham supporters' clubhouse, it's all a bit bewildering. Politicians, lawyers, marketing gurus, multimillionaires and foreign consortia now control the future of their beloved team.
This has been part of our life for a long time.
This is our club, and they're taking it away from us, aren't they?
I'm forever blown.